And get ready, our next panel is Repairing Neighborhoods, Healing Wounds to Achieve Health and Spatial Equity. Please welcome to the stage Mikeya Griffin, Executive Director of Rondo Community Land Trust in St. Paul, Minnesota. Scott Kratz, Senior Vice President, 11th Street Bridge Park Director from Washington. Leona Medley, Executive Director for Joe Louis Greenway Partnership in Detroit, and our moderator, Marian Liou, Director of Arts and Culture at Smart Growth America.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to give one more round of applause to Asali. More artists at convenings. So Leona, let's start with you.
Okay.
Followed by Mikeya and Scott. Our built environment embodies and makes visible the harms and wounds in our history and that are happening now. You are leading an effort to physically repair our built environment, and through that, enable healing that is holistic and deep. Can you describe one foundational condition necessary for this healing process?
Thank you so much for the question. If you're not familiar, the Joe Louis Greenway is a 30-mile reconnecting communities project that is taking old rail line and taking our riverfront on the south of our city and connecting it to the neighborhoods in the north. It connects over 167,000 residents in 4 different cities and just 23 neighborhoods in Detroit alone. It's one of the largest public space projects that we see of this magnitude across the country, and over $300 million. So the city of Detroit led this effort. And I can tell you one of the foundations of this work, especially here in Detroit, a majority black city, but with a large connection to multicultural races, whether it is the Hispanic and Latinx community, whether it is the Yemeni community, the Bangladeshi, the Arabic community. This project is connecting all those neighborhoods, and the foundation is those communities, is those residents. And so the project started with a 2-year community engagement that culminated in a framework book that was published. And in that framework book, what was echoed over and over again from residents is the need for public space projects like this to really center healing past racial traumas from past public space projects. And so how do we really center that a Reconnecting Communities project needs to actually reconnect communities? Putting a railway through a neighborhood took these neighborhoods and disconnected them. The residents on one side no longer interacted on a regular basis with the people right in their backyard on the other side. The residents in one city, it made it more difficult. And so you did everything on one side of the train tracks as opposed to going back and forth. And so the center and the focal point of our efforts at the partnership is to ensure that we are centering community and what communities need. And then, you know, the other part is, I think it's critical to understand that cities cannot do everything. And so while you may be able to build the public space and put the concrete down and put the playscapes in, there is a psychological healing that has to happen and some deeper work that has to happen beyond the pavement, beyond the playground. Just putting in a greenway in and of itself in neighborhoods that have been rooted in a lot of disconnection for decades, and now you're saying we have now built this path and you should reconnect, it doesn't happen like that, right? There is work that we need to do with communities, and residents are talking about that. We don't understand our neighbor. We don't understand that difference, and just because you put that path in doesn't automatically make that understanding happen. And so we're really focused on having some of the difficult conversations within community where we are talking across differences and trying to use the project as a vessel to have those conversations and to do that work.
In 1958, a cute little black couple in St. Paul, Minnesota, in the largest black community of Rondo, were displaced from their rooming house. that was my great aunt. She was pregnant, and they had a little boy. In 2014, let me tell you. So they got displaced because a freeway went through it. They put Highway 94 and completely bifurcated the community. As a kid growing up, I would have to walk across a very rickety catwalk to get to my family that lived on the other side of the community. And so let me get back to my story here. In 2014, when they started putting in the other infrastructure, Green Line light rail, one of the most strongest women I know, in a moment of her vulnerability and weakness, that same woman who came up here with her husband in 1940, grabbed my hand and she said, "Kiki," with tears in her eyes, "please don't let them take my house." From 1958 to 2014. And as the executive director of Rondo Community Land Trust, a beautiful, wonderful 30-year organization that's been in the community, I became the executive director a few years ago, coming back to actually do work in my community, knowing what those harms were and how the built environment impacts our community, impacts our psyche, impacted my family's psyche when I see all the fits and starts from the time that the infrastructure came in and destroyed the community. Over 700 homes were taken and 300 businesses were destroyed during that process, but that was just the freeway. It didn't take into account urban renewal and other policies. And so today, now that's 10 years, wow, 2014, 2024, we have a community that is still waiting for, our elders are tired, our youth don't see themselves in the community anymore because there's really no physical representation of them and us and how I grew up in that. Because of the continued disinvestment in the community, we're like on our fourth wave of gentrification, so it's been very interesting. And so doing this work, it really is about repairing from past harms as we move into our bright future. We're also working, the community is also working on a Reconnecting Communities project. They envision a land bridge, but that's not gonna happen for a while. And so we need to be able to place make while we're there. And the work that Rondo Community Land Trust is doing along with other community members really is about the built environment. And what we are saying is we need to ensure that culture is at the center of the work that we do as part of the built environment. So we are reclaiming a mile stretch of land as an African American arts and cultural corridor. We are really envisioning, we have over hundreds of units of housing to be able to reseed the 700 homes that we're displaced from. Being able to work through policy to say, hey, look, we also need support from city and the state because we understand, we know, the community knows what it needs, and so we've been able to work with our mayor, who is actually a Rondo, son too, is great. He started something called the Inheritance Fund, so those families that were impacted by 94, that they get significant investment to if they owned. Rondo CLT, Rondo Community Land Trust, has started a right to return to Rondo, and we pair folks who have had significant, history, and whether you owned or lived or whatever, families like mine who rented at first, to be able to come back to the community or stay in the community, right to remain, right to return, really setting for our small businesses. We have a commercial space that's extremely affordable. I know, I'm almost done. Okay, I can stop now, she can go ahead. But, and then one other thing, and then just ensuring again that culture and art as a form of healing and economics.
Thank you, Mikeya. Scott, what is one foundational condition for the healing process and the work that you're leading?
Sure. So it's wonderful to be here. Home for me is Washington, D.C., and it's my great honor to lead the work of the 11th Street Bridge Park, which is a collaboration between our nonprofit Building Bridges Across the River and the District Department of Transportation to heal a community, very similar to the amazing work that's happening in Detroit and in Rondo. Or Minneapolis, St. Paul. Washington, D.C., for those who might not be as familiar, we're divided not only by the Anacostia River that has divided the neighborhood for generations, but we also have not one but two freeways that have long separated this community. The 695 freeway in the 1960s blasted through and displaced 21,500 residents. 63% were African American residents. And on the other side of the river, 295 freeway blasted through the robust and historic community of Berry Farm that continues that scar that's there today. So our work is to try and physically and metaphorically bridge these two parts of the city and heal this part of the city. And I think to answer your question directly, I would say sort of two things. One is, how do we ensure that we're putting decision-making power in the hands of local residents? True agency, right? True authority in the hands of local residents. And I'll give you one example. Before we began this work, we spent 2 years just talking to local residents, communities of faith, nonprofits, community leaders, asking. Sometimes these projects happen where the first thing people see are the bright, shiny pictures where the idea has already been 95% baked. I would argue that's community outreach. That's not community engagement. For us, it was critically important to take several steps back and say, do you even want this? In essence, like asking for permission. We spent 2 years talking to local residents and saying, like, what do you think? Dumb idea, good idea? And then and only then, when we had permission, did we move forward. Where every programming idea for this new civic space has come from the community. Even the design competition, the community, I didn't get to vote, the community voted on our design team, right? So I think that putting decision-making power back into the hands of local residents builds trust. And I think so much of our work is based on trust. And a mentor of mine a long time ago said something that was very thoughtful that I've kept with me to this day, that change moves at the speed of trust. And particularly, right, particularly for communities that have a huge and justifiable trust deficit, it's really critical to make sure that we're action-driven and putting that power back in the hands of local residents.
Thank you, Scott. So Mikeya, this question, we'll start with you. When it comes to harm and healing too, it's never just one thing. You described generations of harm and four waves of gentrification. Unexpected or underlying issues are often uncovered in the healing process. Can you share an example of something that was uncovered or something that came up that wasn't expected, and that probably compounded feelings of being overwhelmed already, but that you really had to lean into and led to deeper healing?
Actually, not really that it was uncovered, but I think it's just our trust in ourselves to be able to solve the problems. One of the things I always like to say is that we've lived the answers we seek as a community, and we have been taught to not lean into our ancestral knowledge and being about collective, about togetherness, about lifting up each other. And when you are in a situation where no matter what you do, it seems as if the very fabric keeps getting ripped from underneath you. No matter if we try at a grocery store here and now it's gone. Whether we try to keep mom and dad's house and now we can't. While we try to do all the things, but because of the system being what the system is, from Medicaid or Medicaid liens, from one of the things that I've seen, we are seeing more and more, is that while this is the transference of a lot of significant wealth in certain communities, it is the transference of a lot of debt and negative equity in community. And that is a surprise to be able to, when we've had someone we told do all the right things, go to school, get the right kind of jobs, get a pension, but yet I can't afford to repair my home. My kids can't afford to live here because it's too expensive. And so really, when we look at what those past harms in every stretch of the imagination, then we have to find ways to make it right for that family. And sometimes it's, all right, we're going to pay you something around the table because we're going to help you deal with the property or deal with your family's issue and figure out where you're going to get equity from. I mean, those are things that have been the layers of things that happen.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think that something else that sort of connects all of our work is not to be sometimes the bricks and mortar is the easy thing to put in, but how do we make sure we're building that civic infrastructure and at the same time, how do we widen the aperture? How do we widen the lens of what a community needs, right? So, for instance, during the pandemic, we were deeply concerned that the community that we serve was going to be disproportionately impacted by COVID, which unfortunately came to be, because the residents that we serve cannot work from home if you're delivering your mail, if you're working the grocery stores, like really keeping the city running, right? So, we partnered with 3 other nonprofits to launch what became the largest privately funded unconditional cash transfer program that's ever been attempted in the United States. We raised, it's amazing, thank you, us and 3 other amazing nonprofits, but we ended up raising $4.1 million and distributing $3.5 million directly into the hands of local residents, no strings attached, because we trust our community to make the right decisions, right? And the impact was huge, and one of the biggest things beyond, of course, what they used the money for, which is what any of us, would use the money for, housing and food and so forth, was repairing that mental health, right? It gave the residents, each residence had $5,500 in cash, weekly groceries, monthly dry goods, the access to navigators to sign up for employment or whatever they might need, and giving our residents some breathing room, right? And the respect and agency to make those decisions was enormous. And what does that have to do with building a bridge? Like nothing but everything, right? That's where we need to make sure that we're listening deeply in the community, identifying where those needs are and seeing where we can address them.
Thanks. Leona?
Man, so many, right? Because it's Detroit, and as Detroit moves, so does the nation. And being that this project is happening in a city with such abject poverty, right? And so when you're investing and going and doing such a large project and you are focusing and centering not on like your central business district, not on your downtown where all the high rises are, but you are saying we want to build this project and take it through neighborhoods, that's a major, major gamble, right? And many of these neighborhoods have been investment deserts. Like the disinvestment has stopped and there has just been no investment, right, for decades. Then you go in and you start it in a neighborhood where the residents have said, we have been ignored for 50 years. There hasn't been a new construction home, a new build, a store opening, any of these things in this neighborhood in 40 or 50 years. But when you look at it, this neighborhood where the construction of the Joe Louis Greenway started is what we call a legacy neighborhood, meaning that these residents live in homes that were their parents or their grandparents. So their level of commitment to their community is unshakable, right? So now you have this major project coming in and are saying this is a greenway, and many residents are like, what the heck is a greenway? And so then we had to go back and say, well, let's spend some time like showing them what a greenway is. And so we took residents on trips to other areas, to Atlanta, so that they can see it. And then they came back and they were like, we want this in our neighborhood. And one of the side effects of this project is how community galvanized their voices to advocate for this project themselves. It no longer was an effort that needed to be led by the city. These residents were like, we want this. Nonprofits formed. There is one such group called Pine Lawn LLC. These are a group of neighbors who created this LLC, pooled their own private resources, their own funds. Might I add, these are seniors, pooled their funds to acquire a parcel of land at a key intersection along the Greenway before it was constructed, and now are working on developing that land. So one of the things that has happened is that residents have said, we have a voice, we are going to fight for our neighborhood. They have also come back and they have learned to identify development that they don't want to see in their neighborhood and fight against that and say, we don't want another car crusher. We don't want another automotive business in our neighborhood. We want to turn we want to change the quality of life in this community. So that's on the good side. But on the other side, these are also residents. And why do you have worked all day and now you have to be a policy expert just so you can have a good quality of life in your neighborhood? You got to figure out how you understand zoning and all of these things just so you can live in peace. And so on the other side, those of us in this room who this is our daily job, we have to say, how do we take that pressure off of community so that when they go home, they can go to a house where the neighborhood is well maintained, the yard, the parks, and all of these things are beautified. That's what our focus is. How do we take that role off of community so when they get off work, they can go kick back on the Greenway and just chill, people watch, and do all the beautiful things that we want to do, and are not sitting up watching community meetings and going to this meeting. I can't tell you how much I call on residents right now. I'm like, good Lord, I email these people 20 times a week asking if they can come and talk about this project, right? That is what we have to do right now, but how do we also pay back? And how am I thinking about the day when I'm saying, I don't want you to come and talk about this project, or here's some money so you can come and talk about this project. Here are the things that we are paying back we talk about equity. Equity is money, right? And if people are not seeing equity in the form of dollars, there is no other table where equity is talked about in terms of these, like concepts. Equity is money, all right? And we are talking about how this project is a pathway for actual tangible dollars to residents. And these are things that we have to make sure that we're prioritizing.
Thank you. Equity is money. Final question, 1 minute each. The work that you're leading is out of the ordinary. We can build roads and highways in our sleep, but to understand what a greenway is, you got to come to Atlanta. So to everyone in this room and every person working in this field, what is one specific commitment that you want for each of us to make so that what is out of the ordinary becomes the norm? And Scott, we'll start with you and with Leona.
Yeah, I would say in addition to what Leona said we would never ask a consultant to come down to work for free from New York City, and that's what we ask of our community all the time. So pay them, right? For every time we convene, we're asking something from our residents. We need to respect their time, and one of the ways of doing that is to paying them. But I would say, on a broader sense, many of these communities that we're working with have been planned to death, right? So be action-orientated. Make sure that as we created our equitable development plan to make sure that local residents aren't just surviving, but they're thriving in place, we made sure that within 2 months, we could start implementing some of these plans so that it wasn't just some plan that was sitting on a shelf that was collecting dust, but they could see their ideas, the concepts be put into action immediately, and that builds trust. That is the keeping your promise over time that then can build a foundation for deeper change.
Ooh. Yes, please, as you're thinking about planning or what you're doing, what really is community wealth building? It is not just dropping someone in an affordable home or an affordable rental. It's not just a small mom and pop business. Where can we all be thinking about what does it truly mean to build community and legacy wealth. There are many things that go into that, and don't think too linear. Don't think about the way that we used to do it. Think about, as we're designing with community, when we're working with people that haven't had the opportunity to even participate as much as at all in the system. Like, what can we do? How can we level the playing field? What are enterprise things that we can do that aren't just about what you can do, but what can we do to ensure that there's long-term wealth building and sustainability in communities?
I would say, where are the young people in your work? Where are the youth in your community meetings? Where are your youth councils? Where are young people in your work? If you are not engaging, and it does not matter if you run a financial firm, a community development organization, a public space organization, whatever it is, where are young voices represented in the communities that we say we are trying to design for the future? If they are not there, you are building things that will not retain young talent in the cities for which you're building them. So where are young people in your work, and how are you centering their voices and ensuring that your organization and the processes from community meetings are designed to encourage young people to participate, to get the brilliance and the value out of our young people in our neighborhoods and our communities? I would say, ask that question of yourself every single solitary day, and figure out ways to structure your organization so that it is inviting, that they want to come, the conversations. We often have these community meetings, they're late at night. My son is a football player. He is not coming to your 6 p.m. meeting because he's at football practice, right? So what are you doing to make sure that young people can participate and they can advocate and they can lift up their voices and have a role in the work that we're doing?
Thank you, everyone.